Chatham Finance Committee. Good afternoon, everyone. Take two. Welcome to the March 19 meeting of the Chatham Finance Committee. Please note, pursuant to Governor Healy's March 29, 2023 signing of the Acts of 23, extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law until March 31, 2025, this meeting of the Chatham Finance Committee is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 508-945-4410, again 508-945-4410, and enter conference ID 698-918-859 #, 698-918-859 #. Or one may join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. Well, this is a live broadcast and simulcast of Chatham TV. Despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide real-time access. We'll post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. So with that, let's see who's here. Joanne Sprague.
Here.
Thank you. Barb Madison, I know, is not present. Tracy Shields.
Here.
Kristen Andres.
Here.
Andy Young.
Here.
John Papalardo.
Here.
Tommy Doan.
Here.
Eric Whiteley.
Here.
And the chair is here. We have a quorum. And notwithstanding the agenda, which previously rolled a couple of minutes ago across the screen, I think we have posted a newer agenda. It'll be fairly brief today. We're going to have a discussion around the potential for a regional municipal swimming pool facility and a vote to be held on that this spring. And we're going to just discuss further the report of the Finance Committee, which is due at the end of the week and seems to be shaping up rather well. Thursday, we are going to be kind of mopping up on all the open, there's not many, but there's a small handful of articles that we need to take our votes on and go on record for. So that'll be Thursday. But today we're going to begin with the non-binding annual town meeting article question. Should we have a municipal swimming pool? And I think to discuss that here is Roz Coleman. Welcome back, Roz.
Thank you.
So nice to see you.
I'm delighted to be back. This is online, but just in case you haven't seen it. Oh, you have this? Oh, good. Well, I have an expert witness that I want to introduce. He will be online, and it will be Superintendent Dr. Scott Carpenter. But I'm going to talk about this piece of paper first, and then hopefully Scott is going to be online soon, but he assures me that he will be here online because he can talk about the details better than I can. You notice that the question that was before us was to pool our resources. And that turned out to be difficult to do unless you used the Massachusetts School Building Authority, and the emphasis on the word authority. If any of you have ever worked in public schools, you know that when it was time for the Massachusetts School Building Authority to come and check your premises, you all had to be on your toes because everyone had to have their act together. If you were in a offering a program, it better be in good facilities. It better be doing what the school authority wanted you to do. So in order to pool our resources, which would be, in the matter of speaking, it would be school systems. Because in Massachusetts, you can't have a not-for-profit or a for-profit company. And I thought surely there must be some not-for-profit companies that could work at public resources. Well, it turns out that there isn't. It is the Massachusetts School Building Authority, with the emphasis again on the word authority. Now, I think that some of you were around when we got the opportunity to build a new regional school because Harwich was in deep trouble. They didn't have a building that was approved by the school authority. And so therefore, we have the regional, we have Monomoy Regional schools. So that's the only game in town that would allow us to really pool our resources, because we have resources. We have the Monomoy Regional School System. As we have something similar that happened quite a while ago in West Hartford, Connecticut. They 60 years ago, set aside a large amount of land, and that was so that they could have a community pool. And so theirs is called Cornerstone Aquatic Center, but they were approved by the town. And it's thriving today because not only is the pool there and all of its accoutrements, but the land is there. And it's important to understand what land public schools have. And I call my expert witness, Dr. Scott Carpenter, to discuss why it might be an important thing for us to look to the schools.
Good afternoon, Scott.
Stephen, can you hear me?
Muted, Scott.
How about now?
There you go. Better. Thank you.
Yes. So, I definitely, sympathize with Roz when it comes to, somebody who thinks that a community pool in our towns would be great. I have reached out to the Mass Association or the Mass School Building Authority, but haven't gotten a return reply from them in terms of whether or not a community pool project is within their purview, nor do I have from my own school committee they haven't taken any sort of action as to whether or not they would support sort of taking ownership of the feasibility study. But when it comes to just a community pool and what it could do for our students and our families, not to mention adults and retirees and school superintendents who are rehabilitating a injured leg, like myself, I think there's a lot of benefits. I mean, we're surrounded by water, but really don't have that community pool that we can teach swimming lessons and help students become lifeguards. And we don't have that community pool where we could add a swimming team, here at the high school, for our students. So I think there's a lot of upside to what Roz is advocating for. I do think we need to get some clarity as to whether it is something that the MSBA is willing to take on, and whether they consider that to be part of their purview. And again, we'd have to get some clarity from the school committee on whether or not, if we were playing this all the way forward, is a pool something the schools should take ownership of. If I'll speak for myself, not for my committee, I think it's probably beyond the scope of our mission. But I don't want to underemphasize how strongly I feel for a community pool. And I know there are a number of different initiatives, both where Roz, what Roz is talking about, and some private ones to try to see a community pool built in this region. And again, I think it would just be great for our families and for our community.
Thank you. If you have any questions, I think this is a good man to explore that, about how that would be done. But it's a first step to say that we'd really like to pool our resources, and our resources are public schools. And yes, there would be steps that Dr. Carpenter would be well aware of what the process would be. And it's not to say that it would be an overnight process. It just means that it's a step forward.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Roz. Before we begin, I just have one kind of clarifying question, if I could, please. And I guess I don't fully understand or appreciate the need or requirement, if there is such a thing, for the Mass School Building Authority. Why are they part of the conversation, as opposed to the town of Chatham and Harwich and Orleans? And
Well, a private company has no jurisdiction, cannot work with a public entity. And so a private company, what they would like to do is build a private, on private property, a resource. And they say, in our area, it would be just fabulous to have such a resource. But where are they going to build it? They have been talking to various, anyway, they have to find property. And the only thing they can do is ask for us to give them the names and addresses or the email, the information about people in our area who might want to join a for-profit pool, a community pool. There might be a way for municipalities to work together. That was something that Mike Schell had mentioned, and some of the larger cities have done that. Like, for example, Belmont did that. But for a smaller area like ours, where we are, if we had a regional pool, it could be in the Brewster line, and it would still be about 6 miles or 7 miles for all of us to get there. So we are a relatively small area, and our resources lie really within the public school effort. Now, again, this is step one. Who knows whether we could actually get every school. Scott knows better about how you have to talk to the Massachusetts School Building Authority and see if they're interested in this. You'd have to talk to Harwich. You would have to talk to Brewster, and you'd have to talk to Orleans. Those are the 4 schools that would have an interest in this. And this is simply step one, saying that we would like to explore pooling our resources. So,
okay. Thank you, Roz. I think Joanne was first on the button.
Hi, Roz. Nice to have you back
Joanne.
with the
Nice
FinCom.
to be here.
I'm not clear yet whether we're talking about a community pool located somewhere not on the school grounds. Are we talking about a community pool located within the Monomoy Regional School property, or both?
Well,
Or either.
Actually, nobody knows how much property we have. I think Scott has a very good idea, but we've never done a survey. We have no idea how much property that we own in common, say, in just the Monomoy region. And having a feasibility study would just be nice, because we would then know, is it feasible for us to have a pool for just the Monomoy region? It might not be. We might not have enough land in common. For example, there are behind the Harwich Community Center, there is plumbing, but we don't know to what extent. We don't know how much it would would have to be done. We don't know whether there's space to, there are presently playing fields behind that school. And we don't know whether there's enough space, say, behind the middle school here in Chatham to replace that. We don't have the details about how much space we have. So a feasibility study would just be nice to see if it's feasible for our district to have the Monomoy School District or regional's pool. Scott is skeptical about whether we have enough space to reallocate the playing fields, but we don't know for sure. So a feasibility study would just be nice. And it might show us that, no, it's not feasible for Monomoy School District to act on its own and just have a regional Monomoy School District pool behind the Harwich Community Center. We don't know that. So it would be fun to have a feasibility study. But so that would be what we're asking for, to basically find out whether or not our particular region has enough space that we could reallocate. We don't know. Or whether or not it might be a lot better to merge with Brewster, say, who has all of this wonderful conservation land that they put aside, that there's a lot of possibility there if they wanted to become a regional school. I mean, have a regional pool. We don't know. So this is basically step one, to find out whether we would be interested in having a regional pool somewhere. And this is step one. And
Well,
Scott, what would you say to that?
I've just shared with Roz, when it comes to the land that the schools lease from the towns, there's, at neither elementary school is there a footprint big enough to add a pool and have sufficient parking for for a pool that you'd add. At the middle school, if one were to add a pool, then you're taking offline a softball field, that town and youth sports use, or a soccer field or a baseball field, so I and the same at the high school. The high school has this big front yard that is just used throughout the warmer months by youth soccer and youth lacrosse and football, and all of our athletic teams use that when the turf field is in use. So I think I don't think that there's space within the school district's leased land for the pool that Roz describes, but I definitely think that I understand her want to have a broader conversation with the greater community, or Chatham and Harwich, talking with each other about where might there be space that one could explore using as a joint community venture for a pool.
So,
Thank you.
the follow-up?
Joanne, please, yep.
From what I know, there certainly is a lot of interest in a pool, whether it's community or town or what. So I think, from my point of view, it's worth exploring. But maybe the town manager could give us some idea off the cuff of what a feasibility study would cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our feasibilities have been running anywhere between 30 and 50,000, just depending on if it's already a site that's been vetted. If there's multiple sites that have to be looked at, it could be more expensive than that, but it generally ranges between 30 and 50,000.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. I note that Kristen and Tracy had their hands up. I just, kind of a point of order, I'd like to clarify what we're discussing here, which is, as I understood it, the question posed, shall the town of Chatham explore participating in a regional swimming pool facility? That sounds like a yes or no vote at town meeting versus now we're talking about a feasibility study costing $30,000 to $50,000. What's on the agenda? Let's to be clear. Can somebody clarify that, Dean? Could you possibly, yep, Dean DeCastro, our liaison, has his hand up. Thank you, Dean.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, this is on the warrant as a select board article, sort of sounding like a petition article because Roz was the initiator of it. And Roz came to me and asked how she could get a question, non-binding question, before town meeting, which is the question that's before you. And the select board voted unanimously to put it on the warrant and unanimously to support it. It has no fiscal note. As I would envision it, if there's an affirmative vote at town meeting, then I think it would be incumbent upon the select board after town meeting, when we review all the votes at town meeting, to determine what, if anything, we as a board might want the town to do, and we would get some guidance from the town manager. There has been a lot of interest in the swimming pool, as Joanne has said. A couple of years ago, we did an exhaustive study on a petition article for a swimming pool at the location of the swimming pool. It's now closed, and it's going to become a coffee roasting business, I believe. And that did cost about $50,000. It was an incredibly exhaustive report, and concluded that it would have cost the town of Chatham about $5 million to put that pool in good shape. And so we obviously decided not to go forward with that. So if there is to be an affirmative vote, then I think what I could see happening is that the town would explore with adjacent communities, towns of Harwich, Orleans, and Brewster, as Roz said. And Orleans and Brewster, of course, participate in the, are members of the Nauset School District, and I think that school district has a swim team, and there's a swimming pool somewhere in the district that they utilize. So I don't know what level of interest those towns might have. But the regional school district, our regional school district, is an obvious candidate to look to for possible participation, and Scott has indicated that he's checked with the school building authority. I'm just hearing this for the first time, whether there's any role. It would be nice if the state would pick up the cost of any kind of feasibility study, but you'd have to determine, where it might go. What are the possible locations? Is there really interest in the other towns? Is the school committee interested in doing this? But right now, there's no fiscal note, and I think if there were an undertaking following a vote at town meeting in the affirmative to do this, it would be incumbent upon the select board and the town manager to determine how to go about it and what it might cost and where the money might come from. But the select board has committed no funds to this at the present time, nor has the town manager. So that's how I understand it. It's an exploratory thing. It's a simple question, yes or no, and that's how I see this as being before you.
Okay, that's most helpful. So for the avoidance of doubt, there's no feasibility study contemplated. Personally, it's strictly an expression of interest.
No.
Okay,
If you
that's most helpful.
an affirmative recommendation, all I see it is you're voting to say, yes, we should explore this.
Yep.
And the select board can say, that's fine, but we're not going to do it because it's non-binding.
Okay, terrific. Thank you for that, Dean. Kristen, please.
I think most of my questions were answered with that. I was wondering if there was a fiscal implication here. I'm still confused whether we're talking about a school pool versus a community pool, when I think there's a difference there. A community pool means people of all ages using it at any time.
Yes.
And so I'm
That's what it
wondering how that
means.
looks like in a school system where students are using the facility. I grew up in a place where we had our own pool at our high school. And, in the YMCA there was another community pool that somewhere else. So I guess this raises a lot of questions, and I wouldn't know how to vote for it. I know it's non-binding, but I guess I'm just not clear on what we're being asked to, and maybe it doesn't really matter because it's non-binding, but I'm still confused.
All right, thank you, Kristen. Tracy, please.
Yes, some of that, what I was going to ask was just covered by Kristen. I guess the linking with the school district is a confusing measure, but there's nothing about the school or school property that is linked with this question. Is that correct? It's just that in discussion of this question, one of the options is to look at properties owned by the school district, which would seem to me to be rather problematic for the towns to use for their own purpose. But that is obviously something outside of my remit. But in terms of what we're voting on, if it is a yes vote, wouldn't that be the green light for the select board to then go out and do a feasibility study? Or would the select board need to get approval for a feasibility study?
Let's see if we can get Dean back up for a view on that question, please. Thank you, Dean.
I'm going to answer two questions, because one, I have some historical information that I'll provide. Because it's non-binding, if it passes in the affirmative, the select board first could make the determination whether to do it or not, because the select board has the authority to say, too bad, we don't think it's a great idea, we're not going to do it. But if we should decide to do it, we would have to consult with the town manager to see what's the best approach. And it might initially not involve any expenditure. It might involve a telephone call, a series of telephone calls to the various other towns and the school district to see if you might be interested in participating. And who knows, perhaps there could be I'm just blue skying here, it could be a committee appointed, intermunicipal committee appointed to look into this. They could come back to the towns and say, you know, we think we should do a feasibility study. It's going to cost X dollars. Chatham should contribute Y dollars. Then we would look to Jill to tell us if we have that money, and if we don't, we'd have to go to town meeting to get an appropriation for it. So I don't know if that answers your question, Tracy.
I have one of the things when we started doing this, we just said Olympic pool. That was really not a good thing to say, because you can do a lot. If we built an Olympic pool, it would cost a lot more money. It wouldn't really meet our needs. All we need is a facility that includes, and as we talked about it in other places, it would specialize in creating a swimming pool to meet the diverse needs of several towns, such as competitive sports pool. That's different than an Olympic pool. A therapy pool, a water aerobics pool, which would be, you wouldn't, in an Olympic-size pool, you certainly couldn't do water aerobics. A wheelchair accessible pool, and swim lessons for all ages. And that means for the entire region. So in thinking about this, we discovered, no, we're not asking for an Olympic-style pool. We're asking for a facility that incorporates a lot of needs for the whole community. And yes, it would be a town sports pool, but it would also be a water aerobics pool for people like me, and a therapy pool for kids who might have been injured in playing football or something, or whatever. So it encompasses, so our understanding of what we need changed from an Olympic-style pool to a facility, and you could build the whole facility cheaper than you could one Olympic pool. So we learned a little bit just in asking the question.
The question is framed in a very general, open-ended way, so that it allows for flexibility to examine whatever options might be available. It's conceivable to me that if the various towns got together and said, we're going to build a pool next to the Harwich Community Center, that it's conceivable that the regional school district, which is across the street, the high schools across would want to use that for their swim team. But it could be used for others. When I refer to an historical situation, I'm from Quincy originally, and I think long before the school building authority was set up, the city of Quincy knocked down 2 elementary schools, one called the Lincoln School and one called the Hancock School. And they built a brand-new school, and they called it the Lincoln Hancock School. But people in the neighborhood wanted a swimming pool, so they put a pool in the building, and they call it, I think it's still called the Lincoln Hancock Community School. And I think it's available not just for the students at the school, but for the community at large. I think they probably have, different sessions for swimming opportunities. So you could do something like that, I would think, in conjunction with the other towns in the school district. So I hope that answers, well, at least it gives you perspective of what I think a community pool could be. But the fundamental point is that the town of Chatham, I don't think, can afford to build a swimming pool on its own. I know the Recreation Commission has been interested in a pool. I think the chair of that, you haven't talked with Meredith Fry, have you? I don't think so. I think she wants a swimming pool somewhere. So there is some interest. When we did the previous study, we had a petition article a petition that was submitted to us, signed by at least 100 people in town. So we proceeded with that, but we went to town meeting to get the money. Anyway.
So is this more specifically to ask the town for permission to discuss with other towns? Because from my perspective, it seems, I certainly don't need to be convinced about the merits of having a community pool, and I think the town in general has sort of shown that interest, but this is so that we can ask the people about talking with regional partners.
Yeah, but I don't think we need the permission to go to a town meeting to do it. But I think the sentiment on the select board after Roz presented this to us was, let's see if the town really wants us to do it. Let's get a sense of the voters at town meeting. I mean, we could have put it on the ballot. I mean, that was somewhat more extreme, I think. We wanted to take the temperature of the voters at town meeting to see if they really wanted us to do something like this.
John, please.
Yeah, thanks. I see no reason not to support the non-binding, get a sense of the town meeting floor on whether this is something we should spend time exploring. I mean, I'll support it. And coincidentally, I actually grew up in West Hartford, and this is where I learned to swim. In Cornerstone, and it's a fantastic facility for all the uses you described. And I remember when we were converting the Main Street School into the community center, the swimming pool was a big part of that conversation and consideration. Ultimately, we didn't do it, and I still hear from people all the time that we should have. So let's see what the town meeting has to say, and hopefully, if it's not only in the affirmative, but strongly in the affirmative, the select board will respond and chart a course for exploration.
Thank you. Eric?
Couple things. So in the ask here, there's a mention of Harwich and Orleans, and Brewster's been thrown out. Is anyone else involved in this conversation right now? Is anyone else having this conversation? So even the part about the Harwich Community Center potential, so this is the only place where this is being discussed right now?
Well, I only know what Roz has presented to us, and I think you have spoken with someone at Harwich, but I'm not aware of any interest or exploration going on in any other town or even the school district.
I don't think that there has been a lot of support from Harwich on the proposal. Of course, it was an Olympic-sized pool, and it wasn't talked about as pooling our resources. So I don't think Harwich is is enthusiastic about voting for the thing on their non-binding. That's what I've heard from some of the Harwichians who are trying to get this brought forward. So probably Harwich is not going to vote yes.
Okay, thank you. So I know it's a non-binding ask here. I'm not going to support this from my position here. I think it sounds like it's really probably not, the question isn't quite ready for prime time, what's being brought to us and being brought to the town meeting to even ask. I know there's a lot between now and when we'd be at the point of really being able to analyze this, but I have significant concerns about the ongoing costs of this kind of a facility for the town or the school district, which ultimately is the town's. From a cost of operations, staffing, ongoing maintenance, replacement cycles. These are very expensive facilities. It'd be very nice to have, but that doesn't mean that financially the town would ever be able to get to the point where it would make sense for us to do it. So I know that's not the ask here, and maybe not where people are looking at for this question, but I think creeping the door open to say, yes, it's okay to have these discussions or whatever the actual ask is, could cost us $30 or $50 or $100,000 more. We threw $50,000 away at the Chatham Health Club study, really for no reason. And I think, unless the other towns were all on board and there was some kind of true regional approach, which it sounds like it may not even be possible to have a regional approach to something like this without going through the school district. And then you're not gonna be able to bring Orleans and Brewster in without some other convoluted connection for that. So I know it's a simple ask, do you want to talk about it more? But I think it creeps the door open for us to spend money that potentially would be wasted.
Joanne, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I, for one, don't mind stirring up the present just a little bit in order to take a good look into the future. And I think a pool, whether it's community, town, whatever, is, it might be in the future of Chatham, and so I think it bears looking at. So I'm in favor of at least giving it a chance for discussion at town meeting. Thank you.
Kristen, please.
I share Eric's concerns. This immediately speaks dollar, expenditures and all the things that you said, staffing. And so a huge expense in the future if it were to come to fruition. And I know it's not binding. We keep saying it's non-binding, but I would hope that our elected officials would respect whatever the town meeting vote was, regardless of what the subject was, for a non-binding vote on whatever the issue might be. So I would sort of expect that our select board would follow through if it were positive, and there are going to be dollar signs no matter what. While we can do a lot of our own homework, that's really, anyway, those are my concerns, and I agree with Eric, and I don't mean to be a killjoy, because I can certainly see the benefits, but there's a huge fiscal implication with this project.
Thank you. Tracy, please.
I guess I just wanted a clarification. Is it a question, is there a non-binding resolution on Harwich's town warrant? It sounded like that's what you were saying, this year? For this exact question?
No, it's a different question.
Actually, Roz, if you could take the microphone, please. Thank you.
Harwich is looking at building an Olympic-sized pool. That's what's on their ballot.
Is it a regional question, or it's Harwich
yes.
deciding if they want to Harwich build an Olympic-sized pool?
It would be regional, but it's not clear that it would have anything to do with the schools, or that it would be a facility, which is what we were talking about, that would not. We've learned a little bit since that one went on the ballot. I mean, I have talked to Mr. Oaten, who's put that on the ballot, And he basically said Olympic because I had said Olympic, and I got more information, and no, we don't want an Olympic pool. And so it was already on the ballot as an Olympic pool. And and it was supposed to be behind the Harwich Community Center. So people aren't excited about putting an Olympic-sized pool behind the Harwich Community Center. So that's the reason that I think it hasn't gone forward. But that doesn't mean that if we were exploring a regional one, the whole point of having a regional system is so that it costs less money. I mean, if you had 4 towns supporting it, then you would have something that was doable. But no, that's why we don't have a pool, because one town, it would be way more expensive than Chatham could afford to have just our town having a pool.
I just wanted to
So-
clarify if Harwich's vote or question is about a regional pool. It sounds like no.
It's an Olympic pool behind their community center. And we don't need an Olympic pool at all. So I can see why they aren't, they haven't thought of the concept of looking at it as a pooling our resources. That's the point, to pool our resources, because no one town can afford the price tag of running a pool. It's expensive. But if we pooled our resources, which is what this is asking us to think about, then it would be reasonable to have a regional pool. It's not reasonable for each little town to have a pool, because it would be way too expensive. We need to pool our resources.
If I could just say one more thing, that to me, it would make sense to initiate conversations with Harwich and these other towns, and if there is some interest from the other towns, then approach our town. To me, this sort of like teases something out when there's no reason to believe that it's something that everybody wants. To me, it would make more sense to start with those conversations with the other towns.
Thank you. This strikes me, and I've got Andy up next and then John, but it's kind of like, strikes me as asking my kids if they'd like to go to the Caribbean for 10 days. It's like, who's going to say no, right? But there are costs to that and implications of that. I thought I heard the superintendent say that there's no land available at anywhere in the school system. I thought, based on what I know, that Brewster and the acquisition of Sea Camps got a pool. So I'm not sure why Brewster would have any interest in sharing a pool now suddenly with Chatham or Orleans. And I would think if you have 4 towns sharing a pool, you probably need 2 Olympic-sized pools. But what do I know? Andy, please.
Thank you. I'm just going to go back to the simple question. Apparently, the select board would like to measure our voters' interest in them trying to figure out a way to do a regional swimming pool. I'd say, fine, go ahead. I mean, I'd argue there's no reason why our select board couldn't explore it without any of this. But nevertheless, if you'd like to find out what the voters think, fine. Ask that question. I'd be happy to support that. But I wouldn't be too confident what the answer is going to be.
John, please.
Yeah, a lot of good comments have been made. I have a lot of the same questions and concerns, and my decision to support this moving forward today has nothing to do with how I may vote for it on town meeting floor or after, if we do get a feasibility study, how I'll treat it after that. But perhaps, given the past 10 years of project development in the town and the criticisms that have been levied on the process, perhaps it is a good idea to start with a conversation or a hands up, hands down on the concept of exploring something with town meeting. No cost. You think it's a good idea or not? Pretty sure a lot of the questions and concerns that have been levied today at the table are going to come up or be in the minds of people on town meeting floor, knowing the town meeting citizenry. But that's the way I see it.
Thank you, John. Joanne, please.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. We're all expressing so many questions and about the unknown and doubts, and that's the reason you have a chance to speak on it and let the public speak on it. Otherwise, we don't know but what it might be something really great for this town. But why should we pass up a chance to express ourselves and get information when at this point it isn't costing us anything, and the selectmen will decide whether to go forward to it or not, and then we'll have the conversation about the cost of a feasibility study all over again.
Thank you, Eric.
So I'm the new kid here, so I may have a different concept or understanding of our role as a finance committee in when a question like this or any question comes before us and then it's going to town meeting. This question is going to be asked at town meeting. The selectmen have put it on the warrant. I see our role as us weighing in on the benefit of that. And if it's as Andy says, the pure question of, is anyone going to support it or not? Maybe there's a thought that it's okay just to say yes. I think I'm looking at as the next step that if I'm looking at the warrant and I'm thinking about where I'm getting my information from, I look to how the finance committee has weighed in on A, B, C, D, or anything. And I think it's part of my role or our role here to look ahead at where that is and where it's going to go. So maybe I'm looking too far ahead and I don't understand exactly what our particular role is. But part of the reason I'm going to vote no is I think coming from the finance committee, we are making a recommendation to the people that are coming in that already have the opportunity to say yes or no. We're not denying them that chance. We're giving them our opinion from this position, what we think. And I think it's not something that I would support now or in the future. And that's why I would vote against it.
All right, unless there's anything further, I'm going to ask for a motion to support the proposed question, shall the town of Chatham explore participating in a regional swimming pool facility? Is there
So moved?
a second?
Second.
Joanne Sprague,
Yes.
Tracy Shields,
No.
Kristen Andres,
No.
Andy Young,
Yes.
John Papalardo,
Yes.
Tommy Doan,
No.
Eric Whiteley,
No.
and chair votes no. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Roz. Thank you, Dean.
What was the vote on that, Mr.
Vote
Chairman?
was 1, 2, 3 in favor, 5 against.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is the draft of the report of the Finance Committee on the annual 2024 town meeting warrant. I have received a number of emails with conceptual thoughts, with edits, with, you forgot a paragraph, a period there, or a W over here, or all of which I'm grateful for. I'm just gonna throw out a jump ball. Where are we? How do people kind of feel about the latest draft? Here's your chance. Tracy, please.
I think it reads really, really well. The only thing that I noticed it sort of not having is and maybe it was because we decided it wasn't the appropriate place to put in a bit of a nudge about that question of what we were talking about, like a building to budget.
Okay, thank you. Others, we can certainly do that. And we've raised that topic. I think, many members of the committee have raised that over the past several years. How do people feel about throwing something into the report about that?
I think it's a good thing to put in to try to explore that more. I haven't yet heard a substantive answer to the question of whether we even can do that. Right? I would sort of presume that we could, but I don't really know.
Perhaps we could ask the town manager her view on whether as a practical matter, something like that's feasible. We've spoken about this previously as a committee. Is that something that we can actually do if we were to put a little nudge in, as Tracy said? And to be clear, I think for anybody who's watching, the question is sort of stipulating a budget for a project of X and have it built to X, even if the bids come in at something point something times X. Is there a way of really sticking to a budget?
So because there's so many steps to a process for a new project, a new structure and so forth, we have to take many steps to get from concept to feasibility to cost estimates to budget to town meeting approval. Once it's approved, there's everything we can do to keep it within the budget. And, you know, contrary to public belief, our fish pier project was done within budget. So I don't know how you take away the public's involvement from each process to set a budget when it's not that we can, it's a year before we'd be able to come back to town meeting. I think with the transfer station project this year with the ballot question, we had it estimated, we had it phased, but the bids came in $2 million higher than we expected. So we awarded the first phase of the project, and we're coming back to complete the project. Voters certainly can vote against completing the project, but if you gave us, you know, for a pool, if you gave us, you know, $2 million to do it, I don't know how we could even start until we had the actual funds authorized, and that's per Mass General Law. So it's a interesting question. It's just a very challenging implementation with the process.
Joanne?
Yes, Mr. Chair. As I told you, I am honored to have my name on this. It's a terrific report. There is one question I have, and it's one that is not new.
Before we move on, let's stick with it, if we could, please.
Oh,
Let's stick
sorry.
With Tracy's.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thought we were done with it.
I mean, again, it's sort of asked and answered, but what do we think?
I still think it might, like, some verbiage that might even highlight that, you know, the fish pier was built to budget, which I don't think people are really aware of. But it seems to me that projects, once they're getting worked on, and then other committees, you know, and I gather, I understand the value of it being a multi-purpose facility, but like 90 Bridge Street, for example, like more and more kind of things have grown onto it than the original, you know, when the original bond was issued and there was a line placeholder amount in there. And then it sort of feels when we go back to town to ask for more money to finish a project, it kind of feels like we're held hostage to finishing the project and having to spend more money in order to do so.
The one thing I will observe is that Ted Keon, last week in our meeting and a week previously in a meeting that I'd had him with him and a number of town officials, made it, I thought, very clear, at least made it clear to me in the smaller meeting, that the scope of that project had not changed over time. And again, maybe town manager can speak to that. So I just want to be clear on that one kind of point of fact.
Yeah, definitely. So the plans that were at, I think, 90% design have not changed since 2021. It just took at least 3 years for us to get to that project because we were working on the fish pier observation deck, the trap dock. So all along we had a couple of committees working on different aspects of review, but by the time it got to the design and got it estimated, it really hadn't changed. And I think that was really illuminating to me participating in that meeting as well. In 2018, we called it the crayon sketch, and it did have that same bulkhead and so forth. So it's, again, each level of design has more detail. More detail provides a better opportunity for costing it out.
Kristen, please.
Yeah, I would just reiterate, and having been involved on the South Coastal Harbor Plan Committee at the time and having those joint meetings with all the committees, there were multiple interests by each group. But that was, at the time when we bought that property, we thought that was, everybody thought that was great to have this multi-purpose and, you know, everybody would get their piece, or their right of use of the property in some way. So, and I guess along the lines of talking about how projects are financed, I think that the waterfront bond has been a great tool for the town. Again, just to reiterate the fact that having that money set aside for projects and then being able to seek the grants and the permits, I do want to make a point that all of these waterfront projects the permitting is like crazy, like years of permitting. There's so many working pieces, and obviously you're not just building with a contractor that you can get anywhere. You're working with specific marine type contractors. And so it's, anyway, I think that the waterfront bond mechanism has worked really well for the town. I think we just kind of ran into this horrible timing between pandemic and supply chain and, you know, the constraints of the municipality of paying prevailing wage. And, you know, this is not like putting an addition on your house. It's a totally different type project. So I just wanted to make those points. I don't know if they're going to make their way into the report, but I wanted to reiterate those because I think it's an important aspect as we're kind of everybody's dealing with sticker shock, but there are reasons for it.
Thank you. Tommy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that, you know, the scopes of the project don't change, but the materials keep going up, and just like Kristen said, I mean, it was almost 2 years from the time we voted for it till the time we started to build and buy. And how do we take all that into consideration?
Well, and I think that's part of where I was kind of trying to go in I think the eye-opener section was, at some level, perhaps it's a communication issue. Because it doesn't sound, just listening to this conversation, and I think other conversations we've had on this topic, that there's necessarily an easy fix of saying, build it for $5 million. Because you'll end up with a swimming pool the size of this room, for example, in some instances, perhaps. So if the issue is one of sticker shock, and, for example, using 90 Bridge Street, as we have highlighted in our report, this thing went from $4 million, which the select board even initially said, let's try to make it less expensive, back in, 17, 18, to $11.4 million now. How do we keep the citizenry aware of that and keep them on side, right? If there truly are kind of no alternatives other than building a half a transfer station or a small swimming pool, or is the fixed communication? So that's why I kind of postulated that as a potential solution in keeping everybody informed. So we don't have that sticker shock. So there's a more sense of kind of incrementally walking people up the ladder rather than seeing it go from 4 to 11.4. Did that suitably address the issue, John?
Yeah, I did. The eye-opener section of the letter was excellent. In fact, I think this letter that the draft in front of the committee is the best letter of the past 6 years that I've seen. It just keeps getting better and better, and I think that's a reflection of us working together well and having a good working relationship with the town staff and the back and forth. So I think we're making progress. I think I remarked to you on the phone the other day, I went back and looked at some of the previous letters, and I can see the progress of the process that has evolved over time, bringing in, the consultant group out west in Western Mass to sort of educate the community on how to manage debt and the municipal budgeting and everything. Like we've gotten educated and gotten better at what we're doing. I wanted to go back to the question that was before us on putting a cap, allocating an amount of money towards a project. And
Please.
I guess, how the heck would we or the select board decide what the appropriate amount of money is for the project? And, I don't know what the basis would be without going through the process of getting the bids. You put your spec sheet together, but then the people that do the work are gonna have to tell you what it would cost, labor, materials, and everything. But then I'm thinking, well, we kind of handle that or approach that with, on the waterfront side with the bond authorization. How are those numbers put in? Where's the basis for those numbers? Are those guesses as well? 11.4 to do these 5 projects over 5 years. You know, we've now have some experience given 90 Bridge Street and a couple other projects that our guesses aren't necessarily on the mark anymore. So is that how we're sort of addressing this fluctuation in costs and materials and labor by going to a bond structure? And should we think that this 11.4 is actually going to get 60 or 70% of the projects listed done for that amount of money?
So when we first were looking at the bond back in 2017, we worked with the engineers for all of the projects, and I think even before that, because it was primarily about the Fish Pier project, there was a detailed, I think it was even more than a feasibility study on the look of the, or looking at the Fish Pier of everything that it needed based on community input of, to keep it as a municipal fish pier, but as a working fish pier for the waterfront. So I know, and that was well before my time, so that's before 2011. So again, it's time that it takes to go through the review and process. We essentially have a cap. The cap is that we have to, when we put forward a ballot question and the town meeting article before that, you've seen in other projects, I mean, look at, the first project I was involved in was the fire station. I think I got here was already the 3rd time or so. We were able to look at the estimates and changing OPMs and engineers and so forth so that we had a really good, I don't want to say guess, but a cost estimate that had various contingencies, and you've seen it in all the projects. It's worked. It's so infrequent that even in my career, I've had to go back to town meeting for an additional bond authorization. I think it's just a really unique time of the pandemic and of supplies, and then actually having the construction companies available when they're all doing so much of the work, even on Cape, that could be used, like for those who are working on the sewer projects throughout the Cape, you know, they may be able to do a component of, say, 90 Bridge, and I'm not sure if that's the case. So there's so many things working against us, including the time, but the process is really important, and the public process. I understand that there's a frustration with the finance committee, you know, hearing the numbers, but there's been committees that have been working on it. And there's also been transition with staff too, so that we're picking up on some things after working for the last, 6 years on the Fish Pier and the Trap Dock projects. And those were all encompassing for us. So I'm not sure what you called your section of the report, but there's a lot of components, and certainly, my commitment and staff's commitment of keeping FinCom up to date and having the reports to the select board and have it on a project page that's easy to find. I mean, we'll absolutely do that. It's, again, it's really unheard of to have to come back for an additional bond authorization.
John, please.
Well, I appreciate that. And, I've been thinking a lot this cycle about, how to turn that frustration that I've expressed at several meetings into something positive. And I'm struggling to come up with a better process than, we've discussed here. And I don't know if it's a question of process or not, or if, as you state, it's a confluence of bad timing and external forces at play. But at the end of the day, I guess I'm comforted by the open dialogue we all have, and the town meeting approach and the ultimate decision-making at town meeting floor, and, ultimately keeping an eye on the balance of debt the town is carrying and servicing as sort of the ultimate lever to control all of this. Thank you.
Andy, did you have, Joanne, I know you still have your other question, but I think
Yeah,
we're still
go
working
ahead.
this issue. Andy?
Yeah, I found it, I'm not sure about the rest of you, but I found it really illuminating, the last presentation we had on 90 Bridge and the bond. Because, you know, as much as we all try to keep up with things in town, read the paper, et cetera, you know, that detailed rundown, the history of what happened was really interesting. Because it became evident that the scope hadn't really changed, that there was a lot of public process in the sense of public meetings and public bodies, but it just didn't get out there. It didn't get out there in a way that I think most of us were able to keep track of or to consume. I don't know how to fix that. But it's you know, it relieved my mind significantly about 90 Bridge. I frankly don't know how you can go about and say, you know, build this for this price and that's it, other than to say, gee, we're not going to award a contract. Because if you get in too significantly into changing specifications or design, next thing you know, all the other bidders are going to be arguing that this was, you know, did not comply with the state bidding law, right? Because you've gone and messed with really the whole bid package. Why don't they get another chance to bid it? And then we go into the, you know, if it takes another year or two to get it out there, then we're again, you know, suffering cost increases that seem to come along anyway. I think that you know, our chair's idea of more publicity, more information, better exchange of information about how these multi-year bonds are going, is, you know, I'm not sure what else we could do, frankly, other than to not do multi-year bonds. Just take project by project, individual, you know, finance it, you know, if it is a bond, but just by project. And then we run into the whole, you know, issue of permit, you know, which permit's going to take longer, shorter. It turns into quite a mess, I think.
Well, and funding availability for grant applications and supportive grant applications,
Right.
to Kristen's point.
Right. Well, particularly for the waterfront stuff.
Exactly.
I mean, the state and pass through federal funds on that, you know, depend on the town committing to a certain amount of work, a certain amount of money up front.
So maybe a solution for consideration by the committee and perhaps the town administration is to avoid, I don't think we can control for sticker shock in the community, right? You can watch the meetings, you can read the paper, you can talk to committee members, you can only kind of do so much. But insofar as this committee is concerned, I'd like to think we have the ability to perhaps do a little more. You know, maybe we get a semi-annual formal update on open projects. You know, when I was running audit committees and large not-for-profits, we'd get, semi-annual litigation updates. You know, sort of what are the cost exposures we are looking at periodically, and have a complete rundown of these things. And you'd take an hour out of a meeting and just have a formal update, which would presumably serve to mitigate, let everybody ask the questions, would serve to mitigate sticker shock and concerns over, you know, overruns and, you know, scope creep, et cetera, et cetera. So might be something for the administration to think about.
Yeah, sure, certainly open to that.
Tracy, please.
I really like that idea. My bringing it up is more because I'm concerned that the bond is going to fail, and I want it to pass. But I feel like people are going to say, oh, look at how much not to keep harping on 90 Bridge Street, but look how much that has gone up from the other thing. And then the other items that we want to that are in the bond are going to end up costing more. And I think that indicating that we're mindful, just in some way that we're trying to be mindful of preventing the explosion of cost of a project in some way, or that the town is, you know, maybe it's things that you are already doing, like you just said, some of that, but this is a document in which some people might feel reassured voting yes for the bond if they feel like there's some eye on keeping it within, as close to within, just even paying attention to budget. I think that there's a misconception that the town doesn't pay much attention to the budget of a project. They just want to do the project. And I would rather mitigate that so that we can get it passed.
All right. Further conversations regarding the waterfront bond, or should we move over to Joanne's point? Andy?
Just more specifically having to do with the waterfront bond, I think the first call out in the warrant-based capital spending, we never do get around to putting in there what our final vote on recommendation for that project is. And I think it should show up there. We talk about the reconsideration, we talk about the initial vote, but we don't talk about the final vote for that article.
And if I'm not mistaken, I'll check when I get home, but if I'm not mistaken, following the prior conversation we had on that topic broadly, I did put in a sentence saying, for the avoidance of doubt, the committee voted X to Y to support
Okay.
the waterfront bond.
All right, I just have,
That is in there, if I'm not mistaken.
okay, I only have
But
yesterday's.
I'll double check.
I only have yesterday's version.
Correct. All right, Joanne, thank you for your patience.
Mr. Chairman, and don't forget, we have voted in favor of this article, even though some of us voted against. The committee voted in favor of the bond issues, which is what we're talking about. And as I say, I'm very proud of this report and very proud to have my name attached to it. There's one area that I would like to discuss, and that's in your section on an eye-opener. That's on page, well, these pages aren't, no, but it's, you have housing, then you have an eye-opener.
I've got it.
And you talk about the initiative has now turned into an $11.4 million, so forth and so on.
Yep.
While various open meetings among the committees working on the project, as well as with the select board, have been held in the intervening 6 years plus, we suspect there is very little public awareness on how expensive this project has become. My recommendation would be that right there, in order to inform the public, is to put in what the handout from the administration to us on the bonding, on the debt schedule for this article, as well as for the transfer station, that there was a prediction that, for instance, in FY '26, the average cost on the average taxpayer, or the $1.2 million home would be $96. That gives us very good idea of what the project will cost. And if I'm not mistaken, that I just got I've had a couple of those where Carrie has given us the debt for years, for as long as the debt, and each year shows us what the effect on the average $1.1 million. Sometimes she uses 1.2. What's half a million here and there? But she tells us the projected amount on the tax rate for that average home for each year of the bonding on this issue. I think that's important. That's not just talking about it. That's showing a prediction of what it's going to cost.
Understood. So what do people think about that? Should we highlight, Tracy?
It's my understanding that the chart that you're speaking of from Carrie was if all of the bond was borrowed in year one, which we all said was very unlikely. So I don't know how we make a chart, which does seem like a valuable thing to see, but have it when we don't know how much is going to go into each year.
I don't have it here, but I think, I mean, Joanne, you may, but I think there were at least one, maybe two examples where Carrie broke out specific projects as opposed to the whole waterfront bond issue.
Yes.
And
I think I would.
And I know there are a lot of hypotheticals around that, because who knows when you begin to bond, who knows what your interest rate is gonna be. So it's indicative, it's not it's demonstrative, it's not determinative.
And I would let the administration take a look at that, and if we put something in this report to that effect, referencing the handouts that we got, maybe you could talk to the chairman or decide. I don't know, but to me, it's important, and you ask for what we would change if we could.
No, 100%.
And if I could, that's what I would put in there, to give them some idea, the voters, what it will be 2-3 years from now. If bonded, and as we voted to bond it, the $11.4 million, since the Finance Committee is making that recommendation, what is the actual result of that?
Any objections to throwing in some language like that? And again, noting that it's kind of hypothetical, given what we just said around when we bond, how much it costs to bond, et cetera, et cetera. Any
And whatever other grants or other monies might be received.
Okay.
I mean, we're looking into a future that's quite cloudy. We don't know what's going to happen.
Well, I would guess the administration has been pretty good at making that projection, and as close as we can get to it, I think would be honest with the taxpayers when they go to vote on this issue.
Yeah, I can talk to Carrie about that. I know what she's done for each article. She's had the tax rate impact in addition to
Each
the
year.
borrowing. But I just need to connect with her on that.
Sure. Okay. Other comments or observations?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Well, so the window's still open. We've got a couple more days. I'll work in these comments that everybody's made into the latest draft. I'll circulate that probably tonight. And then we're going to meet again on Thursday to go through kind of the remaining open articles. And it'll be our last swing at the ball with respect to the report. I would like to take a moment to give a shout out, which we do in the report, but to highlight Carrie's role as our new finance director. It can't be an easy transition to, learn a new system and, new people and, new finance committee members. And she was thrown right into the deep end of a very deep pool, and I think she did a terrific job.
And we are not easy.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we're easy or not, but I just wanted to give her a shout out. I think she did a terrific job in support of this committee this season. So,
Agreed.
all right, anything further? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, everybody. Joanne?
Yes.
I'm sorry, second? Anybody? Thank you, John. Joanne?
Hang out.
Yes.
Tracy?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Andy?
Yep.
John?
Yes.
Tommy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Chair's in favor. 8-0. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.